Hi, this is Mark Lynd. I want to welcome you to the Remote Workplace series. Today we'll be discussing the 5 challenges in securing a remote workplace with our special guest, Bob Carver. Bob is one of the top 10 ranked global cybersecurity thought leaders and principal cybersecurity threat intelligence and analytics at Verizon. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, Mark, glad to be here.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us. Obviously, we're in the middle of some trying times with COVID-19, and you kind of think about the rapid rise of remote workplace, and we're finding that there's quite a few challenges. There wasn't enough planning, there wasn't enough time, and just the sheer speed and scale.
Absolutely. I think there were a lot of companies that were caught off guard and weren't ready for a remote workforce to happen like literally almost overnight. Luckily, the company I work for, Verizon, they caught wind of what was going on with COVID-19 or coronavirus, and they actually started discussions back at the very beginning of the year. So
very interesting.
We've been quite prepared. Of course, in my own instance, I've been working from home the last 3 years, so I've sort of worked out all the kinks, what I've needed to do to make sure that I can get to everything and, contact everything. I don't know if everybody has this, but I have a desktop phone on my laptop. I have my own mobile phone and then several different messaging apps. So it's like, I'm pretty much ready to go.
Yeah, like you, I was using a remote workplace for quite some time, so it didn't change a lot necessarily for myself and for a lot of my coworkers, but obviously for a lot of companies, it changed a lot as they moved to both remote workplace, remote learning, telehealth, etc. So, that kind of leads me to my first question. What are your general thoughts about securing the remote workplace?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of points that you need to look at in securing the workplace. It's a whole new ball game. For example, how many people that have a home router do they go in and make sure that it's updated on a regular basis? We're talking like, probably once a month, to see if there's any new updates. I would say the number of people that do that are well less than 10%, and that is could be a major vulnerability for a lot of people. One of the other things is if you've seen in the news in the last several months here, almost all the major VPN providers, commercial VPN providers, have had some vulnerabilities, and it has put all the remote workforce that use those major vendors at risk unless the companies go in and upgrade those across the board. And that could be not only the VPN appliances, but it can be the software too.
Yeah, interesting. I think is that largely a result of just the sheer speed and scale and the lack of planning that, because most of these companies just weren't prepared for this, literally the scale of this thing and just how fast it happened. Do you think that's one of the primary causes? And does that actually open its own security concerns?
Yeah, it can. For example, from what I understand, we've had some customers that all of a sudden had to go virtual, like literally overnight. And they came to our company and ordered like 1,000 MiFis so they could, because not everybody had decent internet at their home. So, you can understand that if people were scattered all over the place, the amount of work and coordination it would take to get 1,000 MiFis together and almost literally put them together overnight and get them overnighted to all these customers' employees. So, amazing. And the other thing is, we were talking about VPNs. A lot of people weren't ready for the volume. There's a lot of companies that say, oh, well, we're only going to have 5% or 10% of our workforce be, logged in remotely via VPN, and all of a sudden you have literally overnight, 95% of your company logged into the VPN, and they did not have the capacity. And even I think there was some. I think we were generally pretty prepared for it, but there was some last minute tweaking that we had to do just to make sure that everybody had the proper bandwidth that they needed on their own home desktops, replicated business desktops.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we have a lot of public sector, we have commercial enterprise and a lot of public sector customers, and a lot of those are school districts and cities, etc. And many of their students, constituents, whatever, did not have Wi-Fi, didn't have access to Wi-Fi. So there's been a real rush to that, right? So you're seeing people throw up fiber plants, trying to find ways to, utilize different frequencies and do other things for Wi-Fi. All of a sudden, there's this mass move to Wi-Fi. I think that's probably one of the unintended consequences as well. I think everybody was going to go there eventually, but I think this really hastened it a lot quicker.
Sure, absolutely. I think, I think everybody's networks we're seeing some issues at the beginning, but not anything major. One of the big things they did, and you may have heard this, they asked like Netflix and Amazon, Prime Video, and some of the other major video streaming studios to reduce their definition slightly. Instead of the super high definition, they would bring down the fidelity just slightly, so to save bandwidth, so people working from home wouldn't be affected negatively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know WebEx and Zoom and Skype, etc. Microsoft Teams. I think they all reduced the resolution for their video to try to do that. It's interesting when something of this nature happens, how everybody kind of leaps in and tries to help, and that kind of brings up another question in my mind is this sudden reliance now on the remote workplace without policies. I mean, usually you have policies internally, you have compliance and governance for all types of things, but most of the policies that were written for remote workplace weren't written for the vast majority of an organization. So is that a concern?
Yeah, I think on, the small to mid-sized companies, I think it definitely is a concern because a lot of them have never had to deal with this before. The companies I've worked for were generally pretty large. And for example, a company that I used to work for before I came to Verizon, they had a policy in place where people had to work from home at least once or twice a month just to test all the remote systems to make sure that they had the business continuity of being able to work remotely, which, really, if we reflect on that now, that probably would have been a good idea for everybody to have done that just about, unless, I can understand some small mom and pop, shops might not do that, but anything that medium size it up, they should have been thinking about that at some time or another. And going forward, they probably will be thinking that.
They will.
So they're ready for the next time around that we have to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. You hear all these pieces around. Our business continuity. You always hear the excuse. Nobody thought this could happen, but
right.
It's going to definitely change the way they plan the future for business continuity and disaster recovery. But one of the other things, especially from a security perspective, is this idea that, this is our primary focus. That gave a lot of bad actors that were using ransomware the ability to go in and also launch a whole new series of attacks against organizations big and small. And you've been hearing about it. They're actually using COVID-19 and people's weakness around it to try to use ransomware to do some nefarious activities.
Oh yeah, I mean, somebody was really malicious. They could almost, they would imitate somebody's internal address and make it look like it's coming from the company and say, here's our new policy around COVID-19. And they click on the link and they're done. I mean, that adds another one, email security. People really need to be watching for that. I mean, because that's probably in most companies, the number one way where malware gets into a company is some sort of phishing email or some sort of fraudulent email that looks like it's legitimate, and somebody clicks on a link or downloads PDF or something like that, and the next thing they know, they're compromised. So,
yeah, there's been kind of a rush to endpoint security now, right? Everybody's like, well, we've definitely got to strengthen our endpoint security piece because we have people working from home. We don't know if their Wi-Fi is secure. We don't know if they have proper virus and malware protection on bring their own device. There's all these things that are now happening all of a sudden. Does when you think about that, do you think organizations are going to be more prepared, in the future? Which it seems obvious, but it kind of depends on how many people stay working remotely. And you talked about the business continuity and doing the testing. There's got to be some form of testing and working from home going forward in case there is a second pandemic or a second wave or another, horrible natural cause.
I think, Mark, you brought up a big, good point there. I think regardless of the size of the company, they need to come up with policies and plans for whatever the next thing is, the next black swan event that comes and hits us. Interestingly enough, I started in general IT, and I did business continuity, and then I started doing security. And so I've had some exposure to that, had some major things happen where all of a sudden we're going, oh my gosh, we have this big major server that has an issue and we have to deal with it. And so, that's when you need, backup servers, maybe hot swap servers where you can just fail over, immediately when something goes wrong with your primary server. But the same thing goes with backups. You're talking about the malware and the ransomware. That's one of the key things you need to deal with. That is good, solid backups, and not backups that are on a Microsoft share, but something that could be separated somewhat, where if somebody had to restore, they would not be restoring the malware that was deposited on their system. So that adds to that. So.
Yeah, to that point, it's funny. You look at 5, 6, 7 years ago, nobody wanted to mess with backups and business continuity and all that. And those companies, that they didn't get all the great employees because people always wanted to go to the hot thing, right? Now all of a sudden not all of a sudden, the last couple of years, you've seen the rise of Unitrends and Cohesity, et cetera, Rubrik, and now it's a very hot place to be. They've got big valuations. They have lots of features. They store stuff to the cloud. They're able to do snaps and all this virtual pieces and lock things down. It's really interesting how that space its whole fortune has changed based on some of the things that are going on in the world, like ransomware and now COVID-19, and they've just become even more powerful and hotter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if we're talking about board of directors here and stuff, I think this is a wake-up call for all those board of directors that are doing some sort of governance and oversight of these sort of things, that there is going to be additional check boxes and plans that will be reviewed to make sure that this sort of thing is in place, because the businesses that did not prepare properly for this, they have been hurt badly. The ones that did prepare, I would say a lot of them have been hurt less. Now, there's some industries, of course, that require the touch and feel and the in-person type transactions, but there's other industries that could easily go virtual, and it's just a matter of the companies being prepared to be able to handle transactions and sales and support after the sale too.
Yeah, so along those lines, obviously there's many board of directors, like there's a bunch of restaurant chains that are actually going out of business. You've seen those announcements are going into bankruptcy. I'm sure that's going to be a very interesting one. Force majeure, those type of things will probably be thrown around quite a bit. But what advice would you give to a leadership team and to a board, with them looking towards their organization, not only going this rapid rise to the remote workplace, but also in the future. They're going to have to plan better. What is remote workplace or remote learning or telehealth going to look like for my organization, let's say a year from today? So what advice would you give them to securing those environments and doing that?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things, of course, this is very, very forward looking, but one of the things we're going to have to do is start doing more zero trust models. This, in many cases, there's people that, or there's companies that say they have zero trust initiatives and products, but they're pretty new. They're very new. I wouldn't say they're maybe quite vaporware, but there's no one product that can cover your entire organization, right. From A to Z right now. It's sort of like bits and pieces. I can take care of this little part over here and this little part over here, but A to Z, nobody covers everything A to Z. But that's something we're going to have to look forward to. I think. Well, and here's something that's happening, and it's in process right now. We're going to have to see more two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication. Not doing away with passwords maybe immediately, but augmenting passwords. And then you're going to have IAM, identity access management, where you know exactly who can access what and at what level of access. Can they access admin? Can they, do they have read-only privileges, or do they have nothing at all? And there was a time when I was much younger that as I went up the ranks and had more responsibility and everything, everybody wanted to give me admin access. And I tell them, I don't want admin access on anything anymore. give me read-only access. Give me access to all the information that I need, but do not give me admin access on anything anymore. and it works out, it works out quite well. That way there could be no finger pointing down the road saying, oh, something happened on this one system, and it's about, I don't have any admin access. I never could have done that. But then at the same time, it wouldn't allow me to do anything, even if I, say that they have the insider threat and that sort of thing. If you don't have that type of access, then you can't perform any malicious acts if you only have read-only access. So anyway, that's just some examples.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we do a lot of zero trust ourselves as part of our organizational security for both our public sector and private sector customers. And IAM is the cornerstone. And we actually describe it as a cornerstone of moving yourself into zero trust, because until you can absolutely identify what devices, people, resources are on your, in your environment, the rest of it's kind of academic, because you won't know if you've been breached and by who. Was it internal? Was it external? Was it a contractor? All these type of things. So we really believe in zero trust, and we're I'm sure you're seeing it too. We're seeing a great pickup out there of zero trust being implemented, or at least what they're calling zero trust being implemented.
Oh, sure.
Not only in businesses, but also by manufacturers. And most of the manufacturers now that are especially in the security space or networking space, they're all coming out with their own zero trust models and to try to push a zero trust and try to lock it down, because it ultimately, if you implement it, it is a better approach.
Absolutely, where you can do that micro segmentation, and if you need access to only that one little slice of your data, then that's what you can get. But then if you're shut off from the rest, then that's good too. depending on the situation, of course.
Yeah,
but I think the zero trust is where we're going to be going in the long haul. Absolutely. In the meantime, though, the identity access management systems is a very good start. You throw the multi-factor authentication in there. Whether it's security keys, or you have say something tied to your phone device for a second factor authentication. And then I think another thing that's really great, where more and more organizations, where you might have a login to that access management system, but you really don't truly have a password that would get you into the keys to the kingdom. You only have the password to the access management device, and that access management system would then log you in to the system that you needed to go into. So it's another layer of protection in there.
Yeah, I've seen some of them. They use SSO and all that, and you're not actually in the network when you use the application. So you can't get to any of the keys to the kingdom. It's a really interesting piece. Well, obviously, Bob, we could talk about this all day long. It's obviously we both love it a lot, but I think our audience will definitely be able to glean some great things out of this discussion today. And I want to thank you for your great insights into the rapid ascent of the remote workplace and its impact on organizational security.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mark. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you.